Hello and welcome to the QTV News Desk with me, Chitalu Chinsenge. Headlines in the news: the Health Practitioners Council of Zambia has revoked 2 medical training programs from Lusaka Apex University and 3 from Cavendish University in Lusaka. The Zambia National Farmers Union ZNFU has begun paying back some of the donor funds that was earlier reported to have been stolen, and the ruling PF has called for the disbandment of the board of the Financial Intelligence Center FIC and the dismissal of its Director General Mary Tsuma. And United States President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have arrived in Singapore for their historic summit. And now the news in detail. The Health Practitioners Council of Zambia HPCZ has withdrawn 2 training programs from Lusaka Apex University and 3 from Cavendish University in Lusaka. Briefing journalists in Lusaka, HPCZ Chief Executive Officer Dr. Aaron Mujajati says the programs withdrawn from Lusaka Apex University a Bachelor of Science in Pharmacy and Bachelor of Science in Radiography. Dr. Mjajati says the grounds for the withdrawal at Lusaka Apex are that the Dean does not have postgraduate qualifications, the school has 740 students against 5 full-time lecturers, and that 4 do not qualify to teach. He says the other reason is that the school has over-enrolled by introducing night classes without the approval of the Health Practitioners Council of Zambia, and that the school also has inadequate sitting capacity and materials in the library. Dr. Mjajati, who is also HPCZ registrar, states that the Lusaka Apex University under Radiography has 130 students against 1 full-time lecturer to teach core courses, and the lecturer is not registered and licensed by the council.
We have withdrawn 3 programs from Cavendish University, namely MBCHB, which is Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery. This is the qualification that people obtain to become doctors. We have also withdrawn the Bachelor of Science in Clinical Medicine and Bachelor of Science in Public Health. A bit of a background is that before these programs were withdrawn, the Health Professions Council last year did conduct compliance monitoring inspections in these facilities or in these training institutions. And at that time, these major violations were actually found, and the facilities or the training institutions were given an opportunity to address the violations. And they were given adequate time to deal with the violations that were found then.
And as for Cavendish University, the council has withdrawn Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery and Bachelor of Clinical Sciences. Dr. Mjajati has further told journalists that the teaching staff for pediatrics and child health, internal medicine and obstetrics and gynecology are all part-timers, contrary to the requirements and standard of recruiting at least 50% teaching staff for a particular program. He discloses that some teaching staff do not have HPCZ practicing certificates.
With Cavendish University, we have withdrawn the programs for the following reasons. They do not have teaching staff for core programs, especially under programs that train the MBCHP program that produces doctors. They have no lecturers to teach pediatrics, because the requirement is that they're supposed to have full-time lecturers in these core courses. Internal medicine, obstetrics and gynecology, all the lecturers are part-time, which is against the standard. And the requirement of the council is that a school should have 50% full-time lecturers and 50% part-time lecturers. They have failed that standard as well. Some teaching staff do not have a Health Professions Council certificates and registration. And this was the case even for both schools, if you look at Lusaka Apex Medical University and Cavendish.
In speaking at the same briefing, HPCZ Legal Counsel Frank Lungu said the council is suing the 2 institutions for its failure to protect the public.
our mandate is to protect the general public. And since the two institutions that have been referred to are perpetual offenders, they were warned last time when they were inspected, and the same violations have continued. And in the last inspection, it has even revealed that actually it is getting worse. So to demonstrate and to ensure that the public is protected, we are going to sue these institutions as a way forward, so that we demonstrate that the offenses that they have committed are serious. We need to have a neutral arbitrator to come in, the court to come in and pronounce itself on some of these violations.
The Zambia National Farmers Union, ZNFU, has begun paying back some of the donor funds that was earlier reported to have been stolen. Finnish ambassador to Zambia, Timo O'Connor, whose country and Sweden donated to the union, has disclosed that this follows the reaching of an understanding on the amount that was in question. Mr. O'Connor could not, however, state the amount that has been paid back out of what has been demanded. In an interview with QTV News, Mr. O'Connor says the Finnish embassy is, however, in good cooperation with the union with regards to the funds that were said to have been stolen. Asked whether Finland would in future consider funding the ZNFU after the refund, after the refund has been completed, Mr. O'Connor has responded by saying it is premature to tell. Mr. O'Connor says there is need to first have closure of the events that transpired at the ZNFU and books cleared on the issue of the misused funds. He says he, on the other hand, value the work that the ZNFU leadership is doing in trying to promote the interest of farmers in Zambia.
On the question of whether Finland would be supporting the National Farmers Union in the future, I think that's premature. I think we need to first have closure on the events that transpired and indeed get our books clear on the issue of the misused funds. But I can say that I value very much the work that the Farmers Union and their leadership are doing in trying to promote the interests of farmers in Zambia, also in these circumstances that must be difficult for the new leadership, also in financing terms, since they are receiving much less support from outside.
Information and Broadcasting Services Minister Dora Celia has expressed concern over increased cases of molestation and child abuse being reported in the country. And Ms. Celia is further concerned over how political issues have polarized the media and law enforcement agencies, overshadowing serious matters such as those that have to do with children, such as defilement and molestation issues. The minister has challenged journalists to make headlines out of real issues affecting the communities and not concentrating on politics. She says the increased and continuous cases of children being defiled, molested and abused in schools and homes calls on all citizens to talk about so that perpetrators can be brought to book and for avoidance of such crimes to continue being committed. She has emphasized on the need for the police, school authorities and parents to not turn a blind eye on such matters as they are happening everywhere.
And sometimes I keep saying, as a country, we are so obsessed with just politics, we forget the everyday issues. And some of the everyday issues are just this child abuse. And it's not just happening in schools, it's happening in homes, in our families. And I think that it is an issue that we must address. And I'm happy I've listened to some of the radios, the community radios, talking about this matter, that it should no longer be a taboo. It's an issue we must discuss. I'm happy, I'm glad that I think the judiciary have made examples of a number of successfully convicted people, and that it's no longer an issue that should be hush-hush, whether it's in families or in churches or in schools, and that it's absolutely abhorrent for a teacher or family member whom a child trusts to be the one who is abusing that child. And that wherever this happens, we the journalists must not hesitate to report it. It's better we err on the side of the child. You know, any report of a child saying they've been abused, it's better we assume that the child is right, because we want to make sure that we err on the side of the child and protect the child. And I think I would like to believe that we need to see more headlines on these issues, on these family issues, so that we can protect the children. We need to see more headlines on these stories, because whenever you hear a one-off story on the radio, or you read one in the paper, it's in the corner that some teacher molested a child, and we don't give it thought what that child is going through.
The Human Rights Commission, HRC, commended President Edgar Lungu for publicly stating that the Patriotic Front PF and the United Party for National Development UPND are the main perpetrators of political violence in the country. Commission spokesperson Mlea tells QTV News that the public admission by President Lungu, who is also PF president, that PF supporters are major culprits together with their UPND opponents demonstrates magnanimous leadership and willingness to end political violence and is commendable. Mr. Mlea says the admission of a problem is the beginning of finding a lasting solution to a problem, and it is one of the critical ingredients of peaceful resolution of any conflict. He says going forward, HRC is urging President Lungu and UPND leader Hakainde Hichilema to instruct leaders, members and supporters of their respective political parties to respect the provisions of the Public Order Act, POA, which is aimed at maintaining peace, law and order during public assemblies. He adds that political party leaders must in particular refrain from using provocative language and start respecting the rights, freedoms and reputation of their political opponents. Mr. Mlea says the POA prohibits use of threatening, provocative and insulting language that has potential to breach peace, law and order. He states that the Zambia Police Service must administer the POA fairly without any form of discrimination and protect peaceful democratic public participation of citizens on matters of public interest. Meanwhile, governance activist Leslie Chukuse has commended President Edgar Lungu's commitment to dialogue following his statement that the violence is being perpetrated by PF and UPND and hence the need to sit and dialogue. Mr. Chukuse tells QTV News that this is the starting point that the head of state has taken in finding a lasting solution to the violence being recorded in the country. He says the UPND leader should as well come out in the open and accept that the violence is being orchestrated by his party and the ruling PF.
I think that I would like to commend President Lungu to say now it's up to Hakainde Hichilema not to continue to be arrogant over this issue. Not to continue to be arrogant over this issue. Because we cannot have a situation where two people are being antagonistic to one another and people are dying. Markets are being bent. People are losing business. We can't leave a country like that. We cannot leave a country. So this is an opportunity and we want an immediate roadmap and an immediate response to from Hakainde Hichilema to agree that they will sit down, the two of them, and perhaps maybe only one or two top officials if they want, but President Mwanawasa and SATA demonstrate that they can do it, the two of them. So we commend President Lungu and we are very hopeful that President Hakainde will, rise to the call of President Lungu to enhance proper dialogue and reconciliation. I think that
the Southern African Center for Constructive Resolution of Disputes, SACORD, has called on government to seriously take into consideration the resolutions arrived at by traditional leaders during the recent land policy endeavor. The center believes that this will result in a win-win situation regarding land issues for both government traditional leaders in the country. SACORD Executive Director Boniface Chembe told Q News that zeal shown by traditional leaders to organize themselves, engage and discuss the land policy is highly commendable and should be emulated by stakeholders in various sectors when it comes to national matters. Mr. Chembe adds that the will by the traditional leaders to meet and discuss the land policy shows how they are committed to representing the interests of the communities to the best of their abilities. He is optimistic that with the resolutions arrived at by the traditional leaders, government will come up with a win-win solution to the land issues that will benefit both the traditional leaders and government, and can also be used to address land conflicts in the region and continent as a whole.
The resolutions that we arrived at over the 2-day period, we believe ought to be taken into consideration by the government. They need to sit down and reflect on them and ensure that we find a win-win situation to this land issue in Zambia. We believe that traditional leaders, being leaders from a traditional point of view, are leaders for all citizens, including those in government. Similarly, we believe that those in government who preside over the instruments of power do belong to various chiefdoms in this country. So even traditional leaders are subjects of those who are in government. So the two stakeholders have a mutual interest because they represent the same constituency, and from our vantage point, we believe that they want to represent this constituency to the best of their abilities, and therefore finding a win-win situation is the only desirable thing to do. And we do trust and believe that the traditional leaders and the government have more than the capacity for them to arrive at a solution over the land question in Zambia amongst themselves. And we believe that by so doing, we will be able to avoid as a country some of the land conflicts that have been experienced not only on the African continent but elsewhere around the world. And Zambia will do what we do best, that is to resolve our differences peacefully.
In other news, the opposition National Democratic Congress, NDC, says revelations that 200 newly recruited medical doctors have not been placed on government payroll proves that the government is too broke. NDC Secretary General Mwenyam Senge has challenged the government to come out in the open and explain why it is failing to remunerate its workforce. Mr. Msenge says his party has information that medical doctors are not the only recruits affected in this mess, and that dozens of other medical staff such as nurses, clinicians and radiographers are also affected. He says it makes sad reading that this cadre of medical staff have not been placed on payroll for close to 1 year now. Mr. Msenge claims that his party has further information that government has challenges in raising money for salaries for civil servants. He says NDC first brought out this issue 3 months ago, but that the Treasury has never responded over the matter. The NDC Chief Executive Officer states that it is not a conspiracy that since January this year, government has been delaying the payment of salaries for public service workers. He further states that the high debt burden is hindering government from fully meeting its obligations. The opposition UPND has been challenged to realize that the solution to ending political violence in Zambian politics lies in denouncing its violence formula, Mapatizia. Lunte PF Member of Parliament Mutotwe Kafwaya says he has now established that the violence that was being perpetrated in Mapatizia is one that is now haunting the country's politics. Speaking at the PF Interactive Forum in Lusaka, Mr. Kafwaya, who has echoed President Edgar Lungu's stance on political violence, has also called on the UPND to denounce political tribalism. Mr. Kafwaya has argued that just as political violence has a potential to divide the nation, political tribalism also possesses the same threat to Zambia's unity.
One other thing which is very important and very bad at the moment is political tribalism. Political tribalism, colleagues, is something that must be fought with the same energy as we are fighting political violence. Because political tribalism has got the potential to divide the nation. Again, like political violence, political tribalism in this country, in my view, and I could be wrong, but I have justification, was begun by UPND. As you know, it is only in UPND where you have to be a particular tribe to be able to lead that political party. So now I look at myself, and who is not Tonga. I look at Mr. Mwanza here, who is not Tonga.
And PF Media Director Sande Chanda has distanced the ruling PF from those propagating that the opposition UPND holds a convention. Mr. Chanda says while the PF has nothing to do with such cause, it holds a position that the UPND leader Hakainde Hichilema is breaching both the party and Republican constitution. He says the UPND constitution is in tandem with the Republican constitution that calls for regular intra-party elections within political parties.
Now, Mr. Hichilema says he's not moved by cause for a leadership change within the UPND, and he says that the convention will take place at the right time. Whether it's in 2028, it's at the right time, and only him knows when the right time is going to be. And yet they have a party constitution, and yet we have laws of this country that call for regular intra-party elections within political parties. Then he also accuses the PF of pushing this propaganda, and we're saying, please excuse us. The PF is busy with its own mobilization, with its own programming. We've got our own issues to deal with. We have no time to start pushing propaganda in the UPND. We don't exist in the UPND. The Patriotic Front exists in the Patriotic Front within the Patriotic Front. Now,
meanwhile, PF Media Director Antonio Mwanza has called for the disbandment of the Board of Financial Intelligence Center (FIC) and the dismissal of its Director General, Mary Tsuma. Mr. Mwanza has argued that by publishing intelligence information in breach of the FIC Act, Ms. Tsuma and her board have abused the authority of office and misconducted themselves professionally. He states that Ms. Tsuma must in fact be reported to law enforcement agencies for abuse of authority of office and professional misconduct.
The Act is very clear that only information to do with the obligations of the center and the measures that the center is making to deter financing of terrorism and proliferation, as well as money laundering. That is the only information that should be taken to the public. The other information should never be taken to the public. So it is clear that the act or the action of Madam Tsuma and her board, which is tasked to provide direction and oversight, is an act of abuse of office and professional misconduct. And therefore, Madam Tsuma must be reported to the law enforcement agencies, the police, for professional misconduct and abuse of office, and she must be taken to court to answer that.
Lusaka Minister Bowman Lusambo says his office, police and UZA management will ensure that unruly students are rooted out of campus to end riots. University of Zambia students at Great East Road campus blocked parts of Great East Road and stormed motorists in a protest sparked by a 10-minute power outage. In a statement to the media, the Lusaka province minister has sternly warned the students that he will not tolerate such levels of irresponsibility in the province. Mr. Lusambo says rushing to the streets to protest over a less than 10-minute power disturbance shows a kind of society the nation is breeding. He says it now remains the duty of parents and guardians to inculcate national values, ethics, patriotism and principles in the minds of these children. Mr. Lusambo says as intellectuals, they are expected to understand and appreciate the level of investment that the Zambian people through government are making to enable them stay in school. They should therefore not exhibit their ingratitude using such archaic methods. Mr. Lusambo has since apologized to the residents of Lusaka and specifically to the motorists who were caught up in the disturbances occasioned by the unruly students. The Zambia Bureau of Standards, ZABS, has announced that it will soon set up a regional laboratory on the Copper Belt worth over $3 million United States dollars. Announcing the development to Q News, ZABS Managing Director Manuel Mutale said the regional laboratory is aimed at taking testing certification and training services closer to industry on that side of the country. Mr. Mutale has explained that the lab will divide the works of ZABS in between two regions, as a Lusaka facility will cater for industries in the southern part of the country, while the Copper Belt facility will cater for industries on the Copper Belt, northwestern, Luapula and northern provinces. He discloses that the construction of the facility will soon commence, as currently is at architectural design stage. Mr. Mutale has assured ZAB's commitment to support SMEs by ensuring that they are certified and properly monitored to produce quality products.
What we are seeing there is, some mentorship programs. We've got some specific activities which are going to be funded under these projects. And also, one of the big intervention is that we've got some close to $3 million which we are going to utilize to open up a regional laboratory on the Copper Belt, so that we take testing, certification and training services closer to industry. So that way we'll be able to divide the country into regions, so that the Lusaka facilities can cater for the southern part of the country, and also the Kitwe facility should be able to cater for Copper Belt, Northwestern and the other two provinces, Luapula and northern provinces. So we're quite excited for this support, again mobilized by the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry.
Evangelical Youth Alliance International EYAI Executive Director Reverend Moses Lungu says stakeholders should learn serious lessons from last week's parliamentary by-election in Chilanga in terms of improving the holding of the elections. Reverend Lungu is particularly urging the Electoral Commission of Zambia, ECZ, to learn one or two things in terms of improving the electoral system. Reverend Lungu says it is time for leaders to come together and discuss the reasons why over 20,000 registered voters stayed away from voting to avoid a similar incident in the 2021 polls. He says the apathy that was exhibited in the Chilanga by-election is extremely worrisome, and hoping that the other by-elections will not be like the Chilanga one.
I think it's very, very important that we discourage ourselves from a scenario where we can't talk well with each other, and then we can begin to disparage ourselves as leaders of a nation on the podium. I think that is very wrong. We are calling on politicians, we are calling on the clergymen across the country. It's time that we thought about what has happened in Kenya and find the reason to reconcile. We just have to reconcile. We need our leaders to realize that greatness lies in humility and not in pomposity. Pomposity will not pay us anything. So let's take Chilanga outcome and the incidents, the whole incidents, a very good scenario that should provide great lessons for us so that we can improve on the turn-up of the people. I think Electoral Commission of Zambia should come up with something that should help the people not to shun the election.
Youth volunteers for Environment Executive Director Clarence Muziamba has encouraged Zambians to keep their surroundings and become like Luanda, which is one of the cleanest cities in Africa. Mr. Muziamba is further urging Zambians to dispose of garbage in designated places and keep the environment clean. Mr. Muziamba says people should stop blaming the government and take this as a mutual approach. He says it is everyone's responsibility to ensure that they keep the environment clean so as to avoid any possible outbreak of the diseases.
We want to come on board as the community-based enterprises to partner with the council so that we can help with collection and then dispose of this garbage so that the environment can be kept clean, green and healthy. And we thank the President, His Excellency Mr. Lungu, for relaunching the Keep Zambia Clean campaign. We don't have to wait for the military to tell us to clean, but it should be in us. We should clean our environment, our workplaces. Charity begins at home. Charity begins at home. So we don't have to wait for instructions. For you to work and for you to produce good results, you have to be in a quiet, somber environment, green grass and cool music, not whereby there's loud music. So it's about a collective responsibility. We want to come.
UPND bus drivers in Lusaka have called on the UPND leadership to adopt former Lusaka Deputy Mayor Potiphar Tembo as its mayoral candidate for the forthcoming by-elections. The drivers who stormed QTV studios and spoke on anonymity are urging the UPND leadership to listen to the grassroots in Lusaka before imposing them with a candidate. They have said in order to avoid another humiliating defeat, it is important that the leadership adopts the people's candidate. The drivers from Kulima Tower City Market, Lumumba, Millennium and Kamwala bus stations have said they have every confidence in the leadership of Mr. Tembo, as he once worked in that office and knows what is required of him as mayor.
One, tufuna kuti batitengere Potiphar Tembo. Ujenzepo deputy wa Mulenga Sata. Ndiye wamene tifuna kuti ngati vikwanisika wa president ngati baimvera nkani. Oro ku ground ku amene ku drivers bangabwere kufunsa kuchita consult if they want to consult kuti batifunze kuti kodi muntu amene tingatenga ari right ni ndani, because taona uja muntu anasebenza hapo and ma pressure amene alipo ayamvera mwamene vintu vichitikira hapa avimvera. So it is better wamene uja wamene zapo deputy abwere pa top. Yes. So if tifuna Potiphar Tembo as UPND ndiye wamene aliko na experience kamene tizasebenzesa kamene tikwanza kusebenzesa. So please tapapata inkani tifuna kuti imveki uja muntu wachita bwanji bamuchita adopt, not imverisha batu wanatenga muntu uko wamene abavizungu ndiye bantu wamawativutisa bati.
As we end the news, a recap of the stories making headlines. The Health Practitioners Council of Zambia has revoked 2 medical training programs from Lusaka Apex University and 3 from Cavendish University in Lusaka. The Zambia National Farmers Union ZNFU has begun paying back some of the donor funds that was earlier reported to have been stolen, and the ruling PF has called for the disbandment of the board of the Financial Intelligence Center (FIC) and the dismissal of its Director General Mary Tsuma. That is all we had in the news. You can visit our website qtvzambia.com for more news. Pleasant viewing and God bless.